Hello, my friend. Welcome to the Altar of Stars. I'm very grateful that you found your way here. My name is Teagan West. I'm a ritualist, astrologer, drum maker, and ancestral lineage healing practitioner on Haudenosaunee land, so-called upstate New York. And my own ancestors come from Ireland, Syria, Lebanon, Sicily, and Anishinaabe territory in what is now known as Canada. And my ancestors are a big part of my work and the readings that I offer here. So they're a synthesis of astrology and divination, but also animism and land connectedness to form this kind of intersection of cultural repair through these ancestral knowledge systems. And so if you like what I share here, you can find my work over on SUBSTACK at the Altar of Stars, where there's a pretty big archive at this point of weekly astrology readings in the form of podcasts that I've been sharing for a couple years, as well as tarot spreads and different ancestral rituals for each of the Wheel of the Year holidays or the new and full moons every month. So find me over there if you're interested in going deeper. But yeah, I hope that you enjoy this reading, and if you ever desire to work together one-on-one, there's opportunities to do that. You can find the links for that in the show notes. But yeah, enjoy, take good care of yourselves, my friends. Thanks for being here. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the Altar of Stars. This is the week ahead reading for the week of May 17th, 2026. I'm recording this one again on video for the YouTubers and SUBSTACK for my kin there. And we'll likely keep doing this. So thanks for your support in it. There's quite a changing of the guard this week. And I want to presence what I've been really attuned to and just connecting with folks in my life and working with clients and people this past week. I sense that we're in the heart of change. We're in the eye of the storm now. And I sense that a lot of people are like having the reality check that things are changing. And what I want to presence most is the necessity of grieving this process. I think so often change can be disorienting, it can be overwhelming, it can be confusing, like we don't know which way is up, and we don't know who we are anymore, and there's nothing to cling to in the free fall. That's really disorienting. And amidst all of that swirl, it's easy to lose sight of the heart. And the reality that if we drop a level deeper into the process that's actually occurring and what the bones know and what the animal body knows about change as an emanation of the land, as an emanation of the earth, the body knows how to do this. It's its very nature. We're constantly regenerating inside in such quiet and subtle ways, but constantly. Like the animal body knows how to navigate change. And I experienced something this week where in my conversation with folks that are like reckoning and like realizing like, oh my God, there's no going back now. The only way is through. Holy shit, like that's overwhelming. That's scary. That's daunting. It's like catching up with the fact that it's all well and good to talk about change in theory, but when it's actually happening to you, it can feel threatening to our sense of safety and security, right? But that the true thing that's happening there is that the animal body who knows how to navigate those cycles is actually grieving a lot of loss. Like, there's a sadness to recognizing that you can't go back to the way things were. And I want to start this week ahead reading, before I talk about the astrology, to just like hold for a moment in the humanity of that. We're navigating exceptional times, and it's so easy to get caught up in the noise and the overwhelm and the messaging coming from every direction that is subliminally telling us we should fear for our lives. And perhaps that's partially true, But there's a deeper current. There's that river beneath the river, as Clarissa Pinkola Estes talks about. It's something ancient. It's something that has seen times like these a million times before. It's the river that runs through the bones that are held in the land. It's a deeper kind of memory that doesn't even flinch at the birthing contractions that are occurring on the surface of the earth right now. And that's not to diminish our overwhelm, but it's to right size it. And I sense that a lot of the energy of this week is helping us to right size our response to this moment. And in order to do so, we actually have to feel our feelings. We actually have to drop into the heart and let ourselves feel the humanity of what is occurring. And let the inner parent or that nurturing instinct hold the parts of us that are terrified. Like, if we're not actually reckoning with that layer of our experience, we're going to be running around like a chicken with our head cut off through this whole process. And remember, again and again, I will say this till I'm blue in the face, that this is a marathon, my friends. And in the marathon, we move through many different stages. It's not just one sustained state. It's ongoing. It's ever-changing. It is, like we're shape-shifting in a long-term sustained process of transformation. It makes me think about the different stages of grief that are beautifully available to us now by those grief tenders that have been doing this work on behalf of the collective for many years. And so it's like that. Even our grief has many faces. And so the recognition is like, what is it like to just take a moment to acknowledge that we're going to be here for a while? Like, let that land in your body. So much squirming to get out of the discomfort of it. I've been talking about this since the year ahead reading, is like the urgency to get out of the discomfort of change is exhausting. We could spend our whole life fighting it. And eventually we're going to burn out. And then that's actually when the current can take us, which is the irony of it all. And so what's it like to actually lean back into it? And I don't love the word surrender because it sounds so... Sometimes it can have like a helpless or a passive tone to it, but there really is like... Perhaps it's more the energy of no longer resisting it. Like giving ourselves to that process and trusting that we will move through all these different stages and we will come out on the other side. We're not going to get stuck in one state for too long. I mean, in many ways, the process we're in is quite like a psychedelic journey. And you don't need to have ever sat with entheogens to know what I mean. It's like, grief is psychedelic. Emotions in general are psychedelic. We move through so many different facets of our being, this entire ecosystem of experience that lives inside of this world within our own hearts. Like, there's so much there to explore. There's a whole, what's the word? A whole, trilogy, like a big lore, a big journey that we can move through. So I feel my point's been made here, but I'm also setting us up for the astrology, which is this huge changing of the guard this week. And it, to me, is the essence that we're shifting into a new layer or a new stage of this process. It's all part of the same narrative arc, and these are the many different quests within the larger hero's journey that we're going to navigate. And so the tone shift is like, okay, we're entering a new stage of this process, and it's helping us to integrate where we're coming from and helping us to also better orient towards where we're headed, which is unknown by nature. But that doesn't mean that we can't find our center, right? And I sense that that's actually it. Like, when I sat down to record, I just was listening for a little while, and I heard so clearly. It was like, it made me cry. I heard so clearly the thrum of waves crashing on the shore at the edge of the ocean. the huge force that is the waters slowly changing the shoreline, and held in the tide both the immense peace and the immense power of that force changing the shore, of water shaping the land. And how it can be both immensely peaceful and immensely powerful. Like something like immense beauty and terror at the same time. That's the heart of it, right? And as I continued to listen to this crashing, like this, I felt the like overwhelm in my animal body of like imagining how hard those waves are hitting the shore, imagining the power behind the water element that is shaping the land, right? And how much force is needed to actually create change. It's disorienting. It's a little overwhelming. I was letting myself feel like what it's like as a little kid to just be like pulled under by the tide on your boogie board and then face planted on the shore with like sand in your eyes and just the being mauled by it, right? And I actually think that is what we're coming out of a little bit here, is like kind of being mauled by the powers of change and the forces that be. And that's not a bad thing. It's humbling. Sometimes we need to be kind of like washed up in a face plant. It's good for us. It's humbling for those of us that like to be in control, especially, which is most humans in our conditioning, bless us. But I also, as I stayed with the experience in my body, I was noticing how much it felt like the abrasiveness that we've been navigating for the past month, of especially a lot of air and fire element, like the grit of the sand against our body, like scraping our skin. That felt to me like, oh, this is the Mars and Aries, this is the Gemini energy, this is the grit of dryness that change can actually need to build. Sometimes it needs those dry conditions for the fire to spread, right? You can't have a wet fire starter. It doesn't work. So like we've been with the fire starter energy, and that's necessary. That's a necessary first stage of the process, to be with the fire starter, right? And as I continued to listen to the waves crashing, and I felt the abrasion on my body, I was like, ooh, this has been a lot on us. This has been a lot the past couple months. And I will say, especially the past month, that's where a lot of this air and fire has been. Suddenly it moved into that hang time. If you've ever been to the ocean, you know exactly what I mean. Where there's a moment of absolute silence between the waves pulling back and crashing again. And it's as if in that silence there exists eternity. There's a spaciousness that goes on forever. And you can stay suspended in that. That's the peace between the moments of immense power as the waves pull back and prepare to crash again, right? And I was sensing that this next week and some of the transits we're entering into, that's the hang time, that's the stillness. That's the moment to catch our breath and actually be totally enamored by the beauty and the power of the change that is occurring. It gives us a moment to catch up with ourselves. It gives us a moment to say like, okay, this has been a lot. Kindness. I'm still alive. I still got my boogie board attached to my ankle. And then we get to like hold for a moment in the stillness of that and catch our breath. And I felt like it was like this metaphor for the different stages of the process that allow us to really understand what it is that we're dealing with. And in the suspension, in the silence and the presence, there's an ability to actually acknowledge, like, okay, the process that's underway. When we're getting pulled under the current and we're getting ripped back and face planted again and again by the powers of change itself, it's hard to do anything except just try to stay afloat, right? Just try to swim. And it takes a lot of effort and energy to keep up with it. And I'm not saying that in the sense that we've been getting totally pummeled and that's that. It's like, no, we've been learning how to swim. We've been learning how to navigate this new energy and like calibrate our body to the fact that we're not all settled and comfy anymore in wherever we were seated on shore. Like the tide has rolled in and it's pulled us under. Are you staying with this metaphor? I'm really milking it. But as now the conditions start to shift, that's my point here. And there's an ability to actually acknowledge, like, all right, I'm coming up for air. There's some tenderness here. Like that was a lot on me. And I can actually see things for what they are and recalibrate and reattune to the process that's underway. And the heart of it that I want to land on with this metaphor, and then I swear I'll stop talking about the tide, is that as I continue to listen to the rhythm of the tide, the pull back and the crash, and then the moments of stillness in between, I started to pick up on that pulse of creation. And it was this reminder that even amidst great change, even amidst processes of intense turmoil that we're getting pulled into, there is still a rhythm. And we're able to catch that current. And in doing so, we find the eye of the storm. We find a place to stay centered amidst the change that's occurring. And that doesn't mean it doesn't pull us in and recalibrate us, because that's the point of it after all. I'm being reminded by my ancestors again and again, you asked for this. You said you were ready. You said you wanted it, right? But even in the turmoil, I'm offering the agentic reframe that there's actually the ability to catch the pulse, the rhythm of creation, and find the center and let it keep moving, but really catch the current where we can find our pace with it, right? And I sense that that's the shift here in the stages of this process as we're moving into this week, where there's a lot more earth and water element in the field. And so we're moving from the abrasive dryness that is required for fire to start, which is all this air and fire element, and we're shifting gears. We're kind of landing in a bit more stability, which I think is what is allowing us to find this pulse, this rhythm, and catch the current. And that's what I want to offer you in a very tangible way, is notice that even amidst all the change that's occurring within and without, all around you, and perhaps for me personally, it feels like I'm getting turned inside out. And all of my usual inclinations and like the neural pathways that are so wrought in my system don't even have as much traction anymore. Like it's happening at that level where I'm like, oh, I guess I can just interrupt that pattern now that's been haunting me for like 6 years. It's pretty incredible if you give yourself a moment to acknowledge the opportunity that's available in the disruption. Right? We actually need the disruptors to come in and shake us loose from our stubborn sediment. So there's that opportunity to create new pathways as we're being suspended in midair by these waves that will continue for a bit here. And as the conditions change, especially between the personal planets. So I'll just give you a play-by-play. On Sunday, to start the week off, on May 17th, Mercury enters Gemini. This is nice. Mercury enters its place of domicile. It does pick up the winds a little bit, I will say, but it also helps us to be a bit more agile in our strategy. To me, this is like Mercury helping us adapt to the changing conditions, and to update our stories and narratives about what the fuck is going on. It's like, all right, okay, I get it. Things are different now. Let me update my relationship to the conditions at hand so that I can right-size my stories about what's actually going on and like allow that to help us catch the current. Mercury has been moving through Taurus for the past few weeks. It actually moved really quickly through Taurus, if anyone noticed. It was like barely 2 weeks there. And that was helpful for creating some like groundedness in our strategy about how we're going to navigate it. But I also find that Mercury and Taurus can, at least for me, I experience it as kind of getting me into a corner with my thinking about how to approach the situation at hand. Like there's a limited purview because of the fixed earth energy that's sometimes helpful to like ground and anchor my focus, but it also creates a sense of like I can't really see past the edge of my comfort zone or what is familiar in approaching the situation at hand. And that's just because I am already a stubborn person, so it amplifies that. But I'm making a case for the fact that Mercury entering Gemini helps us to be a bit more adaptable and fleet-footed in our sense of like, okay, our stories, I'm yapping about this all the time, but our stories about reality are what create our experience. It's all in your head. You just have no idea how big your head is. That's it. It's all like one mind. I sat down and I asked what's important for the collective to know right now, and immediately it was like one mind. We're all inhabiting that field of awareness. And Mercury and Gemini can allow us to almost like, yeah, I mean, it's classic portal jumper energy for Hermes. This is the place of domicile for our winged one. And so it allows us to be more agile in shape-shifting and changing the story, thus changing our entire experience of reality. That's my point, right? Your thoughts create your reality, and so it is. And if we're too stuck in a fixed point of view that's not allowing us room to breathe and change and see things differently, see the potential for change, see that we can interrupt an old pattern and just choose a new one. I have to remind myself of this every day. I'm sure I'm not the only one. I hear myself talk about it a lot on this podcast, and yet the living are stubborn. We're in a body, and it creates this density. So I feel hopeful that Mercury will allow us to like update our narratives about how we want to navigate this and adapt our strategies to fit that sense of like, okay, what stories do I want to be inhabiting right now? Which ones have me stuck? What is that creating in my experience? How might one little shift, right, like a Rubik's Cube, just one little shift unlock a whole new paradigm within my life? That's, to me, Mercury and Gemini is so Rubik's Cube core. It's like, let's work it out. Let's find the way. I have had a lot of Mercury and Gemini beloveds in my life, and they can rip on a Rubik's Cube. It is portal jumper gift right there. That's the key, right? It's all a metaphor. One mind. So that's one shift that I actually think is helping in our favor. Something that's worth noting about Mercury's ingress into Gemini is that, when is that occurring? I think it's next week. Mercury will come into conjunction with Uranus. Oh, it's literally, of course, it's on Sunday as well. So Mercury enters Gemini, and Uranus is sitting at 0 degrees of Gemini. Beautiful Pleiades conjunction there. And Mercury will pass right over this beloved disruptor. And so for me, like, it's everything I just spoke to, right? Like disrupting the narratives and a healthy level of trickster energy to help us shake loose where we've become too stubborn and set in our ways and actually limited in our purview about how we could be navigating this whole process. So that's nice. That moves us through the week. Now, that's all happening on Sunday, that little change of the guard. And then immediately on Monday, the lovers shift gears. And something I want to really emphasize here, I'm talking about Mars and Venus. They're both shifting signs on Monday, the same day. And to me, the significance of this is it changes so much our embodied experience of reality. If anyone knows the work of Jonathan Coe, they were doing awesome work earlier this year about how so much of Mars and Venus really influences our embodied experience. Being an animal in a sensual vessel, and how that interfaces with the world around us. And I cannot agree more. So much of Venus and Mars gets diluted to like, oh, conflict and romance. And it's like, no, this is like how we inhabit this animal body and move through the world and assert ourselves and draw, like work with desire, which is so primal, so somatic. Desire is not at all in our mind. It rises up from the embodied knowing. And so with both Mars and Venus ingressing into new sign territories, there's a whole new flavor of our embodied experience. And to me, I'm a little excited for this, if I'm being honest with you. Mars, having been in Aries for the past 6 weeks, it got like too hot for me. And I'm a Mars ruled person, so maybe that's part of it, but Mars dignified can get really intense. Mars is intense in general, but give it like its home territory, and this is a lot of energy that we're dealing with here. And I feel like it made its point. It reached, it achieved its purpose. The fire has been lit. We got it. We don't want it to burn any stronger at this point. We need to shift gears to understand how to tend this flame differently. And so again, it's that shift in the process to say like, what's a different way I can approach tending to the change at hand? If it's not just feeding and fueling the fire and making it bigger. Like, there's a point where the dry conditions of a fire can lead to it spreading way too far in every direction. And I feel like we were just about at that point where it's like, this got a little too hot, right? And so with this changing of the guard in particular, I feel the temperance coming in. I feel, this setting a container that helps to relate to that fire a little differently and say like, okay, what does this need to be fed in a way different than just giving it more and more heat? There's other ways to feed a fire. And one of them is to give it a strong container. If we're thinking also at like a spirit level, feeding a fire can look like song, it can look like prayer, it can look like food and offerings. There's different ways to feed this process. And so the shifting of the guard is like, what are the other ways you want to navigate this, right? So Mars enters Taurus. The only thing I will say about that ingress is that Mars is a detriment in Taurus, if we're thinking about the dignities, which asks us to slow down a bit. And I find the transition between Mars in Aries into Mars in Taurus can be like a screeching halt, because we were just moving so fast and following instinct and like building our pace and like getting things running as Mars was moving through Aries. And then things come to just like a little bit of a faceplant, right? But that's where we can hear the silence between the waves. And so yes, maybe it's a little jarring for our system to like come to that screeching halt, but it also gives us an opportunity to like become coherent again and find right pace. So the Mars and Taurus ingress is where I feel that, hearing the rhythm of the waves in a different way. And sometimes we need to be laid out in order to pay attention to that. And to understand that change and action doesn't always have to look like running and moving and trying to swim and keeping ourselves afloat. Sometimes it can look like listening. There's a lot happening when we sit still. And to me, Mars in Taurus is an energy that knows how to listen and respond accordingly. Not at all from a place of urgency. Sometimes to a fault, right? Mars is at detriment in Taurus because it can take a lot to get going here. That usual initiative and the instinct to act is subdued. But that brings us into another way of relating to the world. It shifts gears from so much physical exertion into deep presence. And that affords us an ability to be receptive, to pay good, close attention, careful attention to how we're doing and our relationship to the conditions at hand. It allows our animal body to take a moment of pause and to breathe into and sense in many ways the change that's occurring underground. Like there's all this surface level noise happening right now. There's a lot of chaos and disruption and disorientation on the surface. But if you drop down a layer deeper, there's a slower type of change occurring. And that to me is what Mars in Taurus is actually attuned to. It's not interested in moving at the pace of urgency, which is so much embedded in our bodies from our conditioning, especially in a capitalist society. And so I feel the Mars in Taurus affords us the ability to drop a layer deeper and find our pace from the attunement of that receptivity. To say all right, I'm not actually going to move until my body, my deeper animal body, my belly, my hips, right, feel open to. Mars in Taurus is movement from a place of receptivity, allowing impulse to come up from below rather than reacting and almost mitigating our relational field. That can be a lot of surface level activity. It's becoming the bull in some ways. And again, I always have a thing about the dignities where it's who's to say that Mars and Taurus in its slow, careful attunement is a weak spot, a detriment, right? There's different gifts here. There's different ways of taking action. And it comes from the body. It comes from that more receptive or yin field, right? This is something that I'm so appreciative of my teacher in Qigong for teaching me the difference between moving from the surface of our skin, moving from the external of the arms, and so much of the way that, especially as a dancer, I was taught to move from the very expressive field where you're big and you're outward and you're shaking everything out around you. But this shift into moving from the yin field is you're moving from the bones. You're moving from the foundation. You're listening deeply to the stillness for the impulse to move, and you're not moving immediately. You're letting yourself actually hear and feel that impulse before you act on it. Moving from the yin field it is moving from the void, that first impulse. And to me, it has helped me to understand the implications of taking action. When we do anything, it's this emergence from the void, from nothing to something. And to actually drop into the gravity of that, no pun intended, but to feel the gravity and the implication of actually choosing to act, to make a movement out of nothing into something, and to expand your sense of how significant that is. Every movement becomes so much more intentional. When I have stayed in a place of stillness and deep presence for long enough, I barely even want to move. And when I do finally make a movement that emerges from that space, it feels like it's creating a world. It's shaping everything, right? That to me is the essence of Mars and Taurus, if we want to make a connection here. What's it like to move from the yin field from that deep place of receptivity and presence, rather than from the surface level stimuli and reaction to every little thing. Because then all of our movements suddenly become kind of meaningless. We're just chasing our own tail. There's no intention behind it. So that's my point, is like the slowness of the bull affords us the ability to be ultra intentional with our movements when we take action. Where is it coming from? To pay close attention to impulse before acting on it. And I feel like, just to maybe ground it a little bit here, in the moment we're in, at a wide view, it feels important understanding that we are experiencing major transformation within and outside of us. That depth of presence and that like leaned back state also affords us the ability to notice familiar patterns, like familiar circuits running through our system that we are acting from. To interrupt that pattern requires a certain level of mindfulness and awareness of them. So when we're moving from this yin field or preconception state, right, like that void space, we also have a lot more perspective and awareness of where the impulse to move is actually coming from. And that in and of itself is the opportunity for interrupting familiar embedded patterns in our system. It affords us the ability to actually adapt to the change that's occurring from the eye of the storm, rather than from the chaos and disorientation swirling around us. It's like, okay, I'm leaned back. I see there's a lot going on. How do I want to move? It gives us so much choice and intentionality to slow down. I mean, gosh, I'm saying it in such fancy ways, but the heart of it is like, slow the fuck down, my friend. If you're overwhelmed, if you don't know which way is up, if you feel like totally dysregulated at a nervous system level by all the uncertainty and the change that's occurring, slow down. Lean back. Lean out of the current and into your center. And just notice. All of that can keep happening around you, and you don't actually need to react to it at all. And if you do want to participate in it and make a choice, let it come from that place of responding to the conditions. I say that like I'm saying it to myself. I'm not calling anyone out. There's no shame in it. It's like, how do we want to pivot? The invitation is to constantly like recalibrate to the marathon and the many little processes that will create it. So the facet, this moment we're in, is the invitation to slow down and actually notice what's occurring. And in that, you have a lot of choice to interrupt patterns and move differently. I feel the combination of Mercury and Gemini and Mars and Taurus affords us that. We can see the many possibilities that are here, but we can actually slow down enough to participate in them differently and choose wisely. I will say that there is a shadow side to this that I sense. There is a challenge, there's an edge to overcome. Where Mercury in Gemini is giving us a lot of perspective, and there's a lot of like, pick your adventure, choose your adventure energy, right? We see all of the different like portals we could possibly jump through, but the Mars in Taurus could very easily go into a freeze state out of overwhelm, where our body is like coming to a screeching halt because we're just like blown out by how much is going on, and there's a resistance to move. The shadow side to Mars and Taurus is like the stubbornness of not wanting to move out of fear of taking a risk, and that there's a preference for comfort and familiarity and security than participating in the change. And so the invitation that I feel this energy will help us with is like, okay, even in the midst of the change and the tide rising and falling and rising and falling, catch the current that gets you to the center. Find your rhythm and stay with it. That is actually quite secure. It's quite stable to fall into the rhythm of creation that is a part of change. And you have to really be able to listen to find that. So rather than get stuck and like frozen out of overwhelm, may it be an opportunity to slow down enough to find that rhythm and that pulse. Catch that current, baby. So that's enough of that. The other piece, the other ingress that's noteworthy this week is Venus entering Cancer. I love this. I love this so much. So this also happens on Monday, like within hours of each other. Mars will enter Taurus, Venus will enter Cancer, and the moon also enters Cancer on Monday, which I think is quite sweet. And they're all going to be like mingling with each other because Taurus and Cancer are sextiling one another in the sky. So it's a nice conversation happening, and it feels like a soothing balm. Again and again, this metaphor of like the silence between the tide and the tenderness of that. I feel Venus in Cancer is really inviting us to drop into the heart here. And so again, with Mars and Venus as the experiential reality, as the embodied dimension of where all of this is being felt and processed, how we're moving through it in our animal body, moving from desire, instinct, negotiating that interface. This brings us into the emotional attunement, into the undercurrent in some ways of like what's actually moving through here. And there's a sensibility to Venus in Cancer that is so stunning. There's a poetry to this that, you know, in some ways it's incredibly inspired. What I notice, I have so many, I'm thinking about the beloveds in my life that have Venus in Cancer placements, and the tenderness is not just this stereotypical meme of like Cancerian energy just crying all the time. That feels like such an insult, honestly, to like the real heart of this energy that is profound and is in touch with something ancient and sustaining. It's in touch with the pulse of creation as it moves through all things and is actually emotionally moved by it. There's an eye towards the wonder of it all. There's an attentiveness and an awe that's like, I'm paying attention, and even though it's scary and overwhelming, isn't it so beautiful? Like, it's the sentiment of like, wow, this is exactly what I prayed for. And if I can get past my disorientation and I can help myself steady the ship, I can actually take in the sublime quality of a prayer answered, of change that is here right now, inviting us into participation. The forces of life and mystery and power and creative emergence welcoming me into a deeper layer of the dance. There's something so inspired about Venus in Cancer. And to me, it also has this kind of like, I was going to say otherworldly, but it's actually so of this world. It's the kind of wisdom of, I'm thinking about an auntie in our community who is like so wise and so leaned back into herself. And there's such an assurance, like she's paying such close attention to life and the way things take care of each other and the ecosystem of care that surrounds us in every direction, human and non-human. And she has this quality about her where she's like, everything's going to be just fine. And that is hard to access, but not so much if you really can feel the web of relationships all around us all the time. And that change is an invitation to enter into that dance even deeper. It's the sentiment of like being able to grieve and to feel your emotions because you feel safe enough to. I'm sure those of you out there that have been in any kind of supportive relationship, be it a friend, a partner, a family member, a stranger, a therapist, like a dynamic that you actually feel safe in can be so intense because it allows you to unfold. It actually allows you to access the river beneath the river and feel your feelings and let it move through and finally unplug the blockage that's been damming up and shoring up your emotions for perhaps years, if not generations. And I'm posing that Venus in Cancer connects us to this sense of safety that comes from relationship, that comes from knowing that we are a part of something much bigger than us and that we are being taken care of all the time by forces seen and unseen, by our ancestors, by the land, by strangers, by our friends and family. Like, it allows us to actually lean into the networks of care that are right in front of us, that so often we miss. That life is relationship. It's all one big ecosystem. And if we can actually give ourselves to that and let ourselves be held by it, because that's sometimes the hardest part, we can unfold into those deeper layers of our emotional process. We can let things move all the way through us, things that haven't been fully metabolized. And I sense Venus moving through Cancer for the next few weeks here is bringing those conditions that are just soothing enough, that are just tender and regulating enough to allow us to actually feel the reality of what's going on and the fear and the terror of it all, but to let us also grieve what needs to be grieved in order to move on. Like, I don't know if we can fully allow a process of transformation to occur without properly grieving the loss of what was. I think without doing so, we'll always be snagged on something that we didn't fully come to closure with. And I recommend spending time with the waters where you are, spending time with the land and with the spirits or whatever powers help you to feel really held by that larger web of relationship, so that you can give yourself to this. And that coherence, that council of beloveds all around you can actually let you allow you to bring the closure to fruition, to catch up with the change that's here. It's kind of I just sense in a way it's kind of like a rite of passage moment. I was thinking about this the other day because there's been, I'll just give a personal example that feels maybe a bit more tangible. I've been thinking about how so much of my business and my business is an expression. It's so funny to even call it a business. It feels like my work, is an expression of what I care about. I'm ruled by a 10th house Mars. There's so much there about purpose and what I create in the world being an extension of who I am, especially Mars and Leo. And I realized the other day that I have made some big changes and transitions so that I could give my attention to new things, so that I can shift my focus where it's really being called at this point. But I didn't properly grieve the sacrifices I had to make in order to do so. I didn't properly honor the closure of the past work and relationships that I poured my heart into for years in order to get to this place where I'm actually ready to make a transition and make a shift. And I realized in that moment that lack of resolve, that lack of closure had me in a holding pattern. has me in a holding pattern where I can't actually fully move into this next stage because I haven't grieved it properly. And to grieve something is to honor it, is to recognize that you loved it well, and yet it's also time to move on. So perhaps there's something in your life where you sense like a little, maybe a grief ritual to say like, I'm honoring that this has come to a close. Thank you. Thank you for your teachings. Thank you for the ways you helped me grow. Thank you for all that you taught me in challenging and meaningful and necessary ways. I will never be the same. And because of that, it's time to be different. It's time to change and keep going, right? And so much of change and closure or whatever else is not about just abandoning our past, but bringing it with us in a different way, carrying it in our heart and honoring it by actually growing from the soil that it laid, the foundation that it created for us to build even more off of. So, tenderness. May we honor it well for the ways that it loved us well. The last thing I want to say about this week is that Wednesday, we enter Gemini season, which is fun. It's the transition between spring and summer. It is the pollinators coming in to start carrying the seeds that we've planted into other areas of the garden and to start fertilizing the fields and spreading the magic in new ways. Gemini season is very expansive. And that word, I wish there was a better word for it, perhaps not in the English language. It's like Gemini season takes the magic of what we've been growing and spreads it in every direction. Knowing that that's a necessary stage of growth is the pollinator stage, right? It's like those flowers in that corner of the garden can't grow on their own. They need further growth to keep going and fulfill the many different stages of their own fertility and sharing the gifts with the world, right? So Gemini season is here. The sun enters Gemini on Wednesday, Mercury day. And then just two other things I want to mention about this week. On Thursday, well, I'll say it this way. We enter Gemini season. Sun ingresses into this new territory. Who do we know is waiting right there but Uranus? And so this is what I want to pause on for a second. We have a Uranus Cazimi at the end of this week. And I feel that the Cazimis for these planets that have just ingressed into new sign territories are allowing us to, like we had the Saturn and Neptune Cazimi when the sun entered Aries. And now we have the Uranus Cazimi as the sun enters Gemini. And this feels like the proper, welcome. This feels like the planet in the heart of the sun being properly initiated into this territory. Like it's been a little ungrounded and restless and funky, like a round peg in a square hole, and Uranus is disrupting and doing all kinds of chaotic coyote trickster shit. And now the sun is like, okay, welcome Uranus. Here's your task. This is the new realm. Welcome. It's like the formal initiation of this new energy. It allows something to solidify. It allows for perhaps a bit of clarity around all right, what we've been with Uranus and Gemini for a few weeks now. What's it bringing? Those Uranus rising sign activations I shared a few weeks ago might be a good anchor for Friday's Cazimi to just actually let the energy land and allow that to create some clarity around how we might want to relate to it. It allows something to crystallize. I feel with Cazimis, something becomes crystal clear about the task at hand. And I don't feel things have been super clear with Uranus. I feel we've been experiencing them and it's been destabilizing. So may this allow for us to actually understand the nature of the instability. To really be aha, I understand the role of the trickster now, right? I was talking to a client today we were doing some ancestor tending, and we were really coming up against some of these other than human energies that are very disruptive and trickstery. And she was grappling with, she's like, why does this even exist? Like, what, should I just get it all the way out of the space? And I immediately thought about the story of Coyote, at least the one I've been taught in the Anishinaabe tradition, that plays such an important role. Coyote is the trickster, Jinango Maengen, the troubled little brother of the wolf. And so in the reality of Coyote, there's an acknowledgement of two sides of the same coin. Coyote is the troubled little brother of the wolf. And the wolf upholds one polarity. The wolf is like, this is my, my screen just went up. All right. This is my pole that I uphold. The integrity, the leadership, the guidance, the groundedness that wolf brings, right? And so, of course, there must be another side to this. It is the dance of polarity. And we see this in so many different creation myths. Last summer, I got to witness the Haudenosaunee version of the creation story, and there's two brothers. And they represent these forces of creation that are mirrors for each other. And it is so important that the trickster nature of this polarity exists. They keep creation in order. One without the other is incomplete. All trickster, and it's just pure chaos. But all wolf, it becomes a little too controlling. It becomes too solidified. And what we were landing on today in this session was how important the balance is between the two, that they keep one another in check, and that the role of the disruptor is actually to negotiate power. Like, when something in creation becomes too powerful and starts to like get too big for its britches, that disruptor energy comes in to right size it and restore the balance, right? But when power has been taken away or diminished, which, not to go on a whole tangent, but this is something that comes up a lot in ancestor work, is there's, due to usually colonial history, is power has been stripped away or diminished, and then that disruptive nature just totally takes over. And so my point is, these energies keep one another in check. We need them. And I've been sensing the disruptor energy come in strong from Uranus and Gemini. And it's like, we don't even really know how to relate to it yet. And the invitation that I feel might be afforded by this Kazemi on Friday is like, how do we want to balance and work with the duality of these energies as they dance together? The oppositional force that they present is necessary for creation to stay in its harmonious pulse and rhythm, right? And I actually feel that there's a kind of inertia that can take over, because so much of the wolf in this example also upholds tradition. And there's power, there's consistency, but there can become a kind of inertia, like no change happening, just sticking to the way things have been. And the coyote does everything backwards and disrupts it so that we challenge the way things are. It's so necessary for them to have each other, right? And so for me, I'm like, I'm just realizing in this moment how necessary that is for the paradigm we're in collectively right now. Like, to balance the disruptor, the healthy disruptive energy with the tradition and stabilizing forces. Like, to challenge the way things have been in a way that affords change, but doesn't just turn into utter chaos and disillusionment. You know, so working with healthy trickster, and I sense the Uranus Kazemi will allow us to see what that's like in our own corner of the collective web, right? Like how our experience of that balance and harmonization can occur in our own life to find the meeting place between chaos and order, right? Like freedom and discipline. Balancing that out. So Gemini season this week, And on Friday, the Uranus Cazimi, the Sun and Uranus will come together and offer some insight. And of course, Uranus has so much to do with like divine revelation. And so perhaps there's even an aha moment around these themes or otherwise. I'm not saying that the whole coyote thing is even alive for you. It might not be. But allowing for that kind of like eureka energy to come through Uranus in this new sign territory and teach us something about its curriculum here, right? That's the formal, like, welcome to Gemini. It's like, there's a whole new curriculum for the next 7 years. What does Uranus have in store for us? Maybe the Cazimi helps to clarify that a bit. All right, last thing I want to just make note of is on Thursday, Venus that just ingressed into Cancer is going to square Neptune in Aries. And I just want to say that this can be beautiful, this can be inspiring, it can be poetic and attune us to that beautiful, like, sublime sensibility where we really get to enjoy what's happening and, like, have a moment where the, like, groundlessness of the silence between the waves opens us up into everything, into eternity. You know, there's something so sublime in that. In the center of change, there is something sublime. That's the sense of it. And at the same time, I do know Venus and Neptune together to be quite a cocktail of rose-colored glasses, right? So just tempering that. And I feel like I always have a little bit of the, like, Jupiter in Capricorn, like, don't get too excited now. But it is a thing that I notice where, especially when Venus and Neptune are involved together, there's a little bit of, like, wishful thinking and starry-eyed rose-colored glasses. And I'm mindful that this is happening in the very early degrees of Cancer and Aries, right? So it might be the thing where we get a vision, we get an idea, we get a glimpse, but it can feel like, wow, that's the whole thing. It can feel like, wow, I'm going to just dive headfirst into that. That's everything. And the invitation is, like, take a week, see how it feels in a few days. Like, maybe don't act on that sublime impulse on Thursday. And if it has to do with romance, if it has to do with creative projects or whatever it is that you're building in your life right now, let the visionary quality come as it's meant to, as, like, a helpful thing, and then keep moving with it, where it's like, okay, how else do we want to, like, give this a body and not just run on idealization. That's a real risk here, is idealizing. So just a little temperance there. But I think that's all I want to say for this week. Really, the heart of it is, like, tend yourself, tend your garden, take care of yourself and each other, and allow for, like, this transition into the next stage of this ongoing process where you can actually, like, feel your body stable on the earth for a minute and drop into the heart, you know, like, let your animal body love what it loves, Mary Oliver. Like, let there be a moment of real presence with what you're actually experiencing here, because it's likely a lot different than what you're experiencing here. And for those of you that aren't watching the video, what you're experiencing in the heart versus what you're experiencing in the head, the mind. And I feel it's just, like, learning how to synchronize them and harmonize these different facets that so often get split when we're navigating transformation and change. You know, the mind can go on its whole spiral, and meanwhile the heart and the body are like, oh my God, I'm feeling so much. And honestly, friends, I'll land on this note. If you've been feeling like, oh my God, I don't even know which way is up, like, what's going, you know, the disorientation of it all, consider that your mind and your body or your heart aren't really talking to one another. Maybe not. But, like, is there a split between mind and body that's become way too dissonant? Because I know for me, I have such a strong mind that is a common occurrence where, like, the mind and body are just functioning on totally different planes of reality, the body's feeling all these different things and the impressions of the past and the emotions, and the mind is like visioning past future spiral of so many different stories. And that split can really get me stuck, and sometimes it can get me into like the nervous system shutdown of like, I'm just gonna numb in some way, shape, or form, and not tend to either the body or the mind, which we know isn't helpful, but it happens, you know? So just take a moment to sense, like, are they communicating with one another? Baseline. Are they on the same page? I find that often the mind isn't on the same page as the body. And it can be helpful to be like, yeah, all that yapping and worry and fear and projection into the future, that's great. Bookmark it for a second. I gotta talk to like my belly and feel what are you experiencing? You know, it's really good to have a dialogue open between them, especially I think in what we're shifting into over the next few weeks. So I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. I hope this resonated. Let me know how it lands. I love to hear from y'all. I've been getting such sweet little like comments and love notes lately, and I have to say it's so lovely to actually hear from you all out there. I don't do this for me. I do it for you. Like, I do it for the one mind thing. So it's nice to hear from other hearts, and I welcome it. Like, I really do read everything that you send me. So thanks so much. And we'll see you next week for the full moon in Sagittarius. The 31st. Full blue moon, baby. All right, enjoy, and see you next time.